Hello, everyone. This is Amiel Zerwin from FilmFestivalCircuit.com and the Assistant Director of the Oregon Screams Horror Film Festival. Right now, we're gearing up for our Fall 2023 screening, which is going to take place on October 7th at the Sunshine Mill Winery and Drive-In Theater. And today, we're talking with one of our participating screenwriters. Mike Ed is the writer behind Bah Humbug. Mike, thank you so much for meeting with me. Did I say your last name right? I just realized I've
You
improvised.
know what? It's okay. I've been called worse today. It's Eid,
Eve.
so that's okay, and appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So let's jump in first with a brief synopsis. What is Bah Humbug about?
It's about a grouchy old guy on Christmas Eve who's out shoveling his laneway begrudgedly, and he has I guess he has an encounter with a malevolent spirit. And yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a fun one. It was a fun one to write. And for me, it was it was one of those things that I think everybody has, that grouchy old neighbor that you really just don't know a lot about. And for me, I was always fascinated by that. Is why would somebody not decorate for the holiday season, and what makes them so grouchy? And that's the kind of story that I gravitate towards. So that one was a fun one to write.
Excellent. Well, yeah, it's cool to have a character like that we're all familiar with in concept and take that kind of as the focus. We get to inside their head a little bit. Do you have any
Yeah.
other inspirations for what led you to write this?
Yeah, I mean, those stories tend to that's my wheelhouse. It's I see those things and I think a little differently. What would cause somebody to not celebrate something so, holiday festive?
Right.
Did something happen to make the person that way? Are they just miserable in nature? And sometimes that is the case. And how does their family feel about it? Maybe they're miserable about the holidays, but their family isn't, and they kind of have to live that way. So that's really how my brain works, and I start thinking about those stories, and that's where this came from. So yeah.
Okay. And this is this kind of horror comedy?
It is. It's
Okay.
got some elements of comedy in it, but it's mainly a horror, with some, some life lessons in it, being a short horror short. But there is some comedy. I always tend to put a little bit of comedy in my horror, and I do gravitate towards a little bit of that. So
Okay.
again, it's got elements of both for sure.
Well, let's talk atmosphere a little bit. Uh, what do you picture as that kind of dominant aesthetic, the dominant mood? Is it gloomy? Is it kind of just, you know,
Yeah,
mainstream?
for me, it's this story in particular, I wanted it to be, isolating. It's an old person, late night, Christmas Eve. It's dark, it's snowing, it's cold. It's he's out there shoveling by himself. Probably shouldn't be shoveling at his age. It's a pretty physical situation to put yourself in, but and it's dark, it's gloomy, it's kind of scary. And then he has an interaction with something that he doesn't know if it's real or not. He doesn't know if he's imagining it, and it starts to become more and more realistic and scary to him, and it becomes more life threatening. And that, to me, there is some comedy in that. So I try to entertain that piece, but it's got a little bit of doom and gloom in it and some life lessons. And I think everybody tends to know somebody that is a little bit negative, and maybe a little bit I guess in a tough spot in life. And sometimes it's these opportunities that maybe can change them as a person,
Totally.
or maybe it's doom, right? So
Yeah.
they've got some choices to make on which decisions and routes they want to go down. And this is a character that chooses one, and it's a fun ride.
Excellent. Well, so one question that I've been asking people is, what does horror mean to you? But I would rather ask, what does Christmas horror mean to you? It's a very distinct genre. It's interesting because it's like, you know, purportedly the most fun holiday of the year,
Correct.
but there's
And
like these stressors, there's these underlying things. What does it mean to you?
you hit the nail on the head, is that it's a festive time, but the holiday season and Christmas in particular isn't always festive for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. Bad things happen on the holidays, car accidents, family members pass. For some people, the festive season is just not a happy season. I'm lucky that I'm not one of those people, but I do see it on both sides of the fence. And that's where I tend to kind of lean towards, is, those kind of stories when something should be festive and it's not, or something should be scary and it's not.
Totally.
Those are the stories that I tend to lean into, and this one was one in particular. And I mean, the holidays for me is a fun time, family, friends, a joyous occasion, and sometimes things don't always go right during joyous occasions, and I enjoy that. So that's where this story kind of originated and kind of came out of.
Okay, totally. Yeah, no, there's this psychic kinetic energy in either direction during the holidays. And
Correct.
you say something interesting. You say, when something's scary or supposed to be scary, but it's not. I feel like the reaction is comedy. If something's supposed to be nice, festive, and it's not, the reaction is
Correct.
dark. I'm wondering, in your intention with this, how scary do you plan for this, or did you attempt for this to be? Is it supposed to be more horror or more kind of psychological with this guy's perspective and the lesson?
Yeah, it's you know what? That's a good question, because it's a bit of both. And
Okay.
I mean, I want the audience, when they're or the reader when they're reading it, to kind of pick a side. Not
Okay.
necessarily, they might not live in the same shoes as Stanley, the lead, but they might know a Stanley, or they might be on the opposite side of a Stanley. And there's even going to be parts, as one direction as Stanley's character is, I feel like there's parts that people can somewhat relate to. I don't know anybody that's real pumped about shoveling snow and having to do it on Christmas Eve, and
Right.
and people slip and hurt themselves. And I think everybody can kind of take a piece of that. They might not be in the same, mind frame as that character, and hate driven as he can be at times. But I think everybody probably knows somebody that is, and this is where the characters start to unfold, and the reader can kind of pick where they want to go with that one.
Okay, totally. Well, I like that because it actually lends itself for a little bit more participation from the audience, and maybe you wouldn't actually compact it into a specific kind of aesthetic or atmosphere. It's a little bit more open ended. I'm curious, when
Correct.
you are writing these things, how much do you have in mind that final filmed product? Do you think at all, or is that kind of you're the writer and others would have that responsibility?
Yeah, and you know what? I've got a frame of mind of where I want the story to go. Sometimes when you're writing, the characters kind of start writing themselves a little bit,
Okay.
and you as the writer kind of take a back seat. You have an idea of where the character needs to go. And honestly, I feel like every time your first draft of any writing script, um has a little bit of garbage in it, but it's got a lot of good in it. So
Hmm.
you get it written, you get it completed, and it's like, yay, it's done. But you sit back and you go, okay, what's good in here, what isn't so good, and let's kind of develop the good. But it's also just getting it into the hands of people that can read it and walk through it and think about it. And for me, it's important to kind of develop that as it goes. But like this script in particular, I wrote a couple years back, and the version that's in the festival today that was up for an award, isn't the same version that I drafted the first time.
Okay.
So it's gone through some changes and some evolution, and a lot of that came from feedback from readers. A lot of it came from me reading it with someone else and seeing that it flows properly, because sometimes you write it and you think it flows, and then you start reading it as if you were acting it out, and it just doesn't sound right, or it
Okay.
doesn't. Yeah, so sometimes it kind of just works its way that way. So for me, I have a goal with the script, and sometimes it takes a bit of a curve, and it goes in a different direction. This one, I kind of always want, I'm big on endings that make you think a little bit.
Okay.
And for this one, I had a thought process, of how I wanted it to end. And as I was writing it, it started to take a different turn for a different style of ending. And I'm really excited and happy about where it ended up in its draft now, versus where it was when it first started.
Okay, interesting. Well, it's very fascinating to hear that process, and I imagine that it does come with some difficulties, having to lop off certain things that were in that original impetus. I'm curious, is there
Correct.
any distinct kind of things you learned from the process of crafting this final or the most current iteration?
Yeah, it's you know what? It's patience, and I'm not driven by patience normally in my day-to-day life. So with writing, I've had to become patient.
Hmm,
You work really hard to get your script completed so you can move on to the next one. And
right,
any writer's got the next one always going, and probably two
totally.
or three. And once you get one completed, it's like, good, I can push that aside and start focusing on the other one that's been in my brain. The problem is sometimes you need some space and you need some time away from it,
Right,
and you can write other things and then or read other things. Sometimes you're reading other scripts to gather ideas and just thought process of words, and then you go back to it with a bit of a fresh mind and kind of start from the process again. So for me, it was really spending time to just kind of take a moment away from it, get back into it, and then just work through what needs to go, what doesn't help the story move, a lot of things. But really, a big help for me is getting people to read it and just getting it in the hands of readers. And entering contests definitely helps because you get different readers and different
totally.
styles. Some of the contests give you feedback, which is always helpful because somebody else might have a different point of view of the story, and maybe they like something that you necessarily didn't like, or vice versa. So I think those things were learnings for me in that creative process for sure.
Okay, well, you touch on some great stuff there, and I definitely sort of clashing against those fears of one. If you're a young writer and you're starting out, many are actually a little devastated to have other people read their work, and like you said, that's so important. You have to bare your soul a little bit,
Yeah.
and the idea of having a bit of patience, even though you just want to keep producing, keep getting it out there, but and sticking with it is very valuable. Well, I'm curious. Then, is this one? Do you have any plans to get this made right now, or are you working on any other projects that you're excited
You
about?
know what? When I started writing, it was for me, it was just a process. I had some stories in my brain. I'm a big time movie fan, as you can see around me. I surround
Totally.
myself with movies for most of my life. And, for me, I've always had stories that I thought I had in me to put out. And, I don't know the first thing about making movies. I just know how to write them. So I write them, and, they kind of call out, and you spend time on them and you cultivate them. And for me, I would love to see them made into a movie someday, right? So
Totally.
that's my goal. And that's not necessarily every writer's goal, but I think we're all in the same boat that we would like to see them up on the big screen someday, in one way, shape, fashion, or form. So that's definitely a goal for me, and that's entering contests like this gives me an opportunity to get my work out there, get my name out there, and opportunities like this interview. So
Totally.
again, that's definitely a future goal. I am working on new stuff all the time. I only started writing about 3.5 years ago,
Okay.
full time as a screenwriter in my fun time. And really focusing on it in this past 3 years. But I just finished my ninth script. Some of them are feature
Nice.
length, some of them are television pilots, some of them are horror shorts, some of them are comedies. It's a mix, and it's just getting all the stories you've got in there and the ideas on paper. And I just finished one a day ago, and I'm excited about that. Just working through the final draft of it, got it in the
Excellent.
hands of some readers, and it is another horror short, and it's about road rage. So I think everybody's had one shape, fashion, or form, where they've either been involved in it on one side or the other.
Right.
And this is just one twist of that story and that style of story. So it was one that I had in my brain for a little while. So I finally got it on paper, and I'm happy to finally start start pushing it out into the world, and I'll get it entered in a few contests here, and just see what the reception is. And I'm already working on other ones just as quick as
Excellent.
that one was finished. So yeah, there's always another story to tell.
Well, that's fantastic. It sounds like you have great momentum with this, and you're not losing it. You're snowballing. You're getting more and more. And
For
like
sure.
you said, it only started three and a half years ago. You said.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, now you're in festivals, man. So that's very exciting.
Correct. Yeah, it
Well,
started to become real when the awards were coming in, and it's like,
yes,
oh, this is a real thing. This is, and it's great to be nominated and selected, and that's where it starts. And you get your rejection letters in there, and just as you win an award in one category, you get told that you're not selected in another one. So
right.
it's really just getting it into the right hands, and finding my audience. And I know my audience is out there, and it's showing, because some of them are winning some awards, and that's great news. So again, it's all momentum, and what fuels me to make the next one. So, and I
Excellent.
feel like every time you make another one, they just get a little bit better each time, and you learn a lot through the process. And I look back at my first scripts and my first drafts of my first scripts, and I look at it and go, wow, I've learned a lot in this period of time. So it's just development and working through that. So it's been a fun ride, and I expect to continue it for a long time.
Excellent. Well, Mike, thank you so much for talking with me today. I'm very excited to see one of your films one day. I know you're gonna make it. And
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for this. This is great. I appreciate your time.
absolutely, well, take care, man.
Thank you.
Bye.